Good morning, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Feels kind of like a Monday morning. I was just driving in. I'm Weather Chief Bill Taylor at the KENS 5 Digital Center, and I'm joined by Meagan Massey remotely from her home. That's what's so cool about this social distancing. Hi, Meagan. Happy Monday. We're finally getting some rain. I can't hear you. I know, I hope they can hear you at home. I can't hear you here, though.
Huh.
There you are. Oh. So one thing's for sure, any rain is so necessary right now. The Oak is at an all-time high, 30,000 today. I was hoping some of the Saturday morning rain or the Sunday showers late would help, but nothing. You know, we are again seeing the highest in years. It climbed last week's 8,000 was the highest in years, but then it went to 29. Today it's over 30. This is the peak usually of what we expect in oak season. So it's another few weeks, unfortunately, before it starts to really subside. But any rain helps in this kind of situation. We got a good chance of rain the rest of today. Hey, I want to show the shirt I'm wearing. Before we get into today's Monday topic, I want to show you the shirt. This is the O'Connor dance team right here. See the gold dusters? And then on this side, Kendall's dad, because Kendall's a gold duster. One of about 43 of them, the O'Connor dance team. And I wanted to celebrate them today because their last performance should have been the spring show. But instead, it was in San Marcos at Texas State when they won the state championship, which was phenomenal. They were at the top of their game. They don't dance, they work, and they're awesome. So I celebrate the Gold Dusters today because we even said, my wife and I were like, oh, Kendall, final performance, it's really got to be special. You won a state championship. And she said, no, you know, our final performance is really the spring show, especially for us seniors, so that we can really have all the emotion saved for that night. Well, because of what's going on, that night doesn't happen, you know, and when they won that state title and we had that conversation, we had no idea coronavirus was coming. I mean, it was just so sad. So my heart breaks for her, but Gold Dusters, love you guys, or gals, sorry. All right, so Monday, Monday pressures. You know, a lot of times back in the normalcy of society, Monday's always kind of considered the day of pressure, right? Back to work, back to school, the Monday pressures. So today we're going to talk about high pressure and low pressure. And this is a really good topic, right, Meagan? Because, I mean, it really is what controls a lot of our weather.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And you have a dry erase board right there, right? So you have some drawing to do, right, Bill?
Exactly. Again, please be forgiving on my artistic ability or lack thereof. I'll still get the point across. We've got some award-winning graphics coming your way, too, to explain this all. I want to say some hellos. I see a lot of folks joining in. Thanks so much for being here. There's Addison, first grade at Founders Elementary. Way to go, Addison. Zaylen's here, fourth grade, Coronado Village. So glad you're here. Hello, Kendall in Bear County. Maybe it should be Bear in Kendall County. Sorry.
Wow.
Good to see you, Kendall. I know, it's not good. In fact, I heard a good joke while in quarantine, but it was an inside joke. Come on. You know, this is, I hope somebody's keeping up.
We're taking notes over here. Don't worry.
They're taking notes. Here's a good idea. How about kids send us jokes? You know, I do that on Tuesday with Taylor. At every school I visit with Tuesday with Taylor, I always have a joke submitted by a student. So we have a great way of ending our morning announcements on those Tuesdays. So I'll encourage all you students right there. Send me some jokes, btaylor@kens5.com, or right here on our Facebook thread. You can do it live as well. All right, so let's first start. Austin is at Los Reyes. Anastasia and Gerald from Harlandale ISD. That's awesome. Good to see you guys. The Hulk Jeep is listening. I love the Hulk Jeep. If you guys haven't seen the Hulk Jeep, it's around town. It's awesome. Haley's in first grade. Hi, Haley. Good to see you. Greenville, Mississippi. Andrew.
Look at that, a Mississippian.
Greenville, Mississippian. Mississippi.
Nice.
I was always so excited to spell Mississippi when I was a kid. Alessandro from Ellison, good to see you. Natalie and Addison from Lavernia, good to see you guys. I'm so glad you're here. Mateo's in pre-K. Hi, Mateo. How are you? All the way up in Hunt, out near Kerrville. NCSA, good to see you. Flower Bluff, Elmsley, down in Corpus Christi. Wow, good to see you. Glad you're here. Casey's in 5th grade. So glad you're here. Again, students and weather enthusiasts of all ages are welcome in the weather classroom. So I want to show you what the first difference, and then we'll get to the graphics, and then we got a really cool experiment, okay? But first and foremost, the biggest difference between a high and a low, the winds that are moving around it, okay? So around a high pressure area, we have clockwise winds. Around a low pressure area, we have counterclockwise winds. So you have to realize that that's the biggest difference between these two areas of air pressure. And with that definitely comes, different weather changes in our lower troposphere and how that affects things. And remember that a low pressure area is what creates nature's largest storm. What's nature's largest storm? Bueller? That's right, I heard it, hurricane. A hurricane is the largest storm on the planet Earth, but it is an area of low pressure. It's a cyclone as a general definition of what it is. We have these on land, we have them on surface, we have them up high in the atmosphere, we have them within several altitudes. They can be very deep, strong domes. I mean, incredible weather patterns, both surface and upper with high pressure and low pressure. But it's all about air pressure. And what's interesting about air pressure is how it relates to your body. And I'm going to show you some of the similarities today in high pressure and low pressure. But first, want to do the experiment? Let's do the experiment first, just to show you the strength of air pressure and how important it is, okay? So I have a regular glass right here. In fact, I know you see a logo on there. I want to celebrate my good friends at Kinetic Kids. This is from their annual fundraiser. It's called Hoot and Annie. Maybe Tracy's watching. Love the Fontenot. This is Kinetic Kids. Go to kinetickidssa.org and find out about all of the programs they have for our special needs community. Children with autism, Down syndrome, all different situations can be helped with Kinetic Kids. They have gymnastics, they have arts and crafts, they have music, they have all kinds of programs. Kinetic Kids is awesome. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I got regular water, regular glass, okay? What we're going to do is fill it up, not fill it up, but put about a third of that glass is filled with water. Real water. All right. See? You ever see that guy? He's on Great Day SA sometimes. He has a carpet cleaner that's all natural and he drinks it live. It's really kind of crazy. All right. So there's our water. I always feel like a stand-up comedian because I've got this little chair here. All right, so water in the glass. Now, an index card. Just a regular little index card. Nothing fancy, okay? Now we're going to put this on top of the glass. Okay, now nothing's going to happen. The experiment is really not going to show us much more than just that index card on top of the glass. Now, if I was to turn this over, the water should pour through. I mean, this is, again, a flimsy little index card. So I'll do this. I've got a little towel. I don't want to spill any water. I just did a little bit. Uh-oh, there we go. Okay, now watch what happens. See that? See how the card stays? Because the air pressure has more strength, is heavier or stronger than the water's force. So even though you've got water in that glass, it won't pour out because air pressure is keeping that card stuck to the glass. Isn't that cool? That's air pressure. That's how air pressure works. And it's relative to how things happen in our body. This is why I brought the towel, because I got a little water on my stool. Okay, that's all cleared up and dried up. Okay, no need to call engineering. You don't like water around television equipment. But let me say that your body is experiencing air pressure right now. There's approximately 14 pounds of air pressure being put on your body by the atmosphere, by the troposphere. Remember, we talked about our layers of the atmosphere. So the troposphere has about 14 pounds of air pressure being put on your body right now. And what's interesting is that you don't feel it, right? You should. 14 pounds is significant. You don't feel it because the way your body's designed is that it exerts an equal amount of pressure to equalize and balance out that pressure being put on your body. So that's why you don't feel it unless you change your altitude, which then changes air pressure. See, whether you're inside, outside, if you're at the same altitude, air pressure remains constant. As you change altitude, air pressure changes. So as you leave the Earth's surface in an airplane, say, your air pressure is lowering. That's why they pressurize the cabin of the airplane where you're sitting is pressurized to equal out. So you don't feel that change in pressure, but you still do. It's when your ears pop, okay? There's something in your body called equilibrium, and that's where pressure, it's part of your equilibrium. Your senses are also working on that to equalize things. That's why sometimes you get an ear infection, you might get a little dizzy because your equilibrium is off because of your ears being clogged and all that. So essentially, that's what's happening in the atmosphere on your body, and there's some relationship here with high pressure and low pressure. All right, before we get to the graphics and Megan, let me show you one thing that's really cool in relationship to that equalization of air pressure. Mm-hmm. So what we know about low pressure is that it's rising air, okay? The air is going out from where low pressure is living, okay? So let's say we have our low right here, air is rising out of that area. Air rises from low pressure. So you have more evaporation going on, you have more warm air rising around an area of low pressure, okay? The opposite being true of high pressure. So if air is rising in high pressure, in low pressure, the opposite for the high pressure, the air is sinking, okay? It's a sinking air motion. Well, here's what happens when these two, and this is part of the relationship the high has with the low. When the area of low pressure is sending air out, the high pressure area says, well, I'm going to help replace the air that you're losing. Because you're losing air, I'm going to send air in to replace what you're losing. Again, like the equilibrium of our body, the atmosphere is trying to achieve balance. Never truly happens, but what does happen is that the high is sending air into the low as a result of that action of low pressure. So in between here, guess what this is? Wind. That's high wind. When these highs and lows get close together, we call it a tight pressure gradient. That's where you have high wind speeds. So the next time my young students are out there and there's, boy, it sure is windy out here, you could actually tell everybody, or tell your parents, tell your uncles and aunts and grandma and grandpa and anybody else around, listen guys, I think what's happening, we've got a tight pressure gradient where high pressure is sending air into the low pressure area in order to replace what air is evacuating. Now what? See? You can sound really cool. But that's really what's happening in our atmosphere. And again, it's really cool of what's happening in the body. It's high pressure and low pressure, Meagan, Massey. Isn't that cool? I love how, again, you can find some of these relationships between the human body and what's actually happening in our atmosphere.
I remember learning about wind and just being fascinated by that, like what actually caused wind. And you're most certainly right about it.
Temperatures involved, cold fronts, are surface areas that are going to be bringing in, usually behind a cold front comes a surface high typically, and you have that surface high area, and moves the low pressure, and, so again, very interesting stuff. Chris Torres, hello. There's Steven. Addison, right? Isn't that cool? So let's go through some of these. Now, on the graphics, we're going to explain some other dynamics of what high pressure and low pressure is. Walk us through this, Megan.
Yeah, Bill, by the way, you have all control of the graphics here, but high
Okay.
pressure, I typically call it our fair weather friend. And so that's typically when we do have that sinking air. And typically you have it start, high into the atmosphere, it sinks down, and then the winds push away. And you just saw Bill talk about that there. So high pressure is associated with sinking air. We typically see a high pressure as this big blue H on our weather maps. And we show that a lot in our daily forecast, right, Bill?
Absolutely. In fact, a big weather player is that dome of
Mm-hmm.
high pressure that can sometimes take over our summer weather patterns, and it brings in warm air aloft. In fact, we've got a topic coming up this
Mm-hmm.
week about the upper level cap, explaining what that means. Well, it means high pressure is in control of our weather pattern.
Yeah, definitely. And, also the winds around this area of high pressure are moving, around the system. And you were talking about how they move in a clockwise fashion. Here's a big weather word: anticyclonic. That's that flow, anticyclonic.
That could be on the final.
That could be the quiz. Maybe it
We need to
is.
do a quiz. We should really work up a quiz. That'd be cool if there was some interactive way to quiz you guys
Yeah.
on some of the terms. But anticyclonic, that's a good one because that's what, remember when I talked about the low being broadly defined as a cyclone, well, the high is the opposite or the anti.
Right. And you said this is typically our summer weather pattern. So it's known, sometimes we call it a heat dome because it brings that warmer weather around, and then we get those triple digit high temperatures in the summertime, which, I'm okay with 70s, not the triple digits. But, with that sinking air, it brings the cool air, and also it's showing that sunshine. So this is what brings that pleasant weather. It's why I talk about it being our fair weather friend.
I love it because when I remember first getting in this business and they were teaching me how to explain the science of meteorology. And so after a couple of run-throughs of a weathercast at about 3 minutes in length, they said, okay, and these were the talent coaches working with me, let's pretend you've got a room full of 5-year-olds. And I know we've got some 5 and 6-year-olds watching. Now explain things. Now do it as if only 5 and 6-year-olds are listening. So I always came up with that high is happy weather. It's always that H for happy because that means beautiful sunshine, fair weather. Because if everything is sinking, remember, low pressure, the opposite, everything is rising. So that creates, and here's another big term, buoyancy, okay, and lift. And that's what leads to more evaporation. We make more clouds. And when you enhance that lift, and there's a lot more going on, then that's when we have, again, a chance of even more weather. While I'm there on that topic, let me show you another part of this relationship of that high and that low, because it's happening at the surface as well. This is really cool. This is how we create instability with low pressure. So if our low pressure air, if we've got winds, let's just say this is the surface right here, right? And here we are at the surface. Now, if we have upper level wind speeds moving at a really fast clip, let's say it's like 100 miles an hour, all that air is moving out. There's air moving up from the surface. I should do a different color there to illustrate. There's air moving up from the surface to try to replace what air's moving out above. So when we talk, we use the term on the weather, upper level support, like the cold front's coming through, but there's not a lot of upper level support, or there is a lot of upper level support. A lot of that has to do with this, high wind speeds aloft. We look at the upper level winds, and if there's high wind speeds aloft, that means there's going to be a lot of wind from the surface going vertical to replace what's moving out. You see what I'm going with here? It's again the atmosphere's quest of achieving balance. And when that's happening, that's creating a lot of instability for us at the surface, a lot of that buoyancy that can lead to more rain or even fuel some thunderstorms. Grandma's watching as well. I love it. Hi, Rosa. It's so cool. Why does the high go clockwise? This is from Emily in the first grade. Why is it going clockwise? That's a good question. I mean, any idea, Megan, or what, I mean, other than that's just how it is?
Well, it has to do with the Earth's spin, first of all, and it varies if you're north of the equator and also south of the equator. So it's actually completely opposite if you're south of the equator. But since we're north, living in the USA, we're talking about high pressure going clockwise. That has to do with the Earth's spin and also the Coriolis effect.
So the Coriolis effect, glad you brought that up and explained it that way. Great job. Because what happens is if let's say I'm standing here in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm going to throw this marker and I'm going to throw it towards Canada. Let's just go big, right? I'm going to take this marker, I'm going to throw it north towards Canada. What'll happen is it'll probably end up in New Jersey, okay? Because the Coriolis effect tells us that as something's moving north, it'll have a right turn in the northern hemisphere, the Coriolis effect. And that is at play with high pressure and low pressure in our hemispheres. Also at play when you flush your toilet, right? So the water in the northern hemisphere, it's going down the drain clockwise. In the southern hemisphere, although I've never experienced this, they say you flush and the water's going counterclockwise. Have you ever experienced that one, Megan?
I have not. No, I wouldn't
I've never
say
been
so.
in the
I haven't
southern
really
hemisphere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody could help us out if you can on Facebook. All right, moving on. So high pressure, again, sinking air leading to pleasant weather. Here comes the opposite, Megan.
Yeah, definitely. So this is what you were talking about with, hot air rises and it can condense and the water vapor will actually condense. And this is how the clouds and the rain form. And you and Stacia were talking about lightning. This all stems back to, how lightning is formed. You have, hailstones colliding and all of that. So this can also bring lightning. So low pressure, that's typically when we get more of that active weather, and that brings that shower and thunderstorm activity.
So exact opposites, guys. Again, that high pressure versus that low pressure. And we even discussed how this can correlate with how you're feeling. Again, the animal kingdom can sense the change in air pressure and knows. Now, a lot of times you see, and we always hear about the animal kingdom reacting to temperature changes. When the birds fly south for winter, right? They know when temperatures and seasons are changing by the feel, but it's also true of pressure, that they know rain is coming, inclement weather, bad weather that low pressure would of course cause. They sense that change physiologically, as do some human beings. A lot of people who suffer with migraine headaches suffer because of a change in air pressure. It really takes a hit when low pressure moves in, or you start feeling it in the joints. We talked about neck and knee and back pain associated with a change in air pressure. So notice again, is this the last of the illustration? If you remember?
I believe so.
I think so too. That again, the low, we typically watch them off the coast of Africa. An area of low pressure gets out over the open Atlantic between June and November, and we know what happens. It starts cranking up, and that area of low pressure, that cyclone, becomes larger and larger and grows into a hurricane. In fact, speaking of which, signed up for a Zoom meeting tomorrow morning with meteorologists that are going to discuss the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season and why conditions are going to be favorable for a bit more active hurricane season than what we had in 2019, because 2019 wasn't too active, Megan. It really wasn't.
And typically it doesn't mean that every storm is going to make landfall. Some of them can stay out in open water and not even impact land. So that's something important to keep in mind. Even though we say it could be an above average season, just know sometimes all those storms aren't going to hit land. Some of them can stay in open water, and it still could be an above average season.
Exactly. If we don't have an El Nino, El Nino tends to send in upper level winds, what we call that wind shear. We talked about wind shear. Well, there's wind shear in the upper elevations that take off the top of that environment. So you have a storm like that rising motion of that low pressure, that hurricane grows vertically. Well, if you've got high winds aloft over top, it's cutting that development off, see? I mean, you're trying to build, but you can't because those upper level winds are strong. That's an El Nino environment that we're not expecting in 2020. One of the broad brush reasons why we could have a bit more active season. You know, I was always a naysayer, not always, but I don't mind discussing if we're going to have conditions favorable for an active season. I don't know if we should continue doing forecasts that are specific to, 7 to 9 hurricanes, 14 named storms, 3 major hurricanes, 40% chance once hits the U.S. The thing about hurricanes, and if you notice those forecasts every year are within 1 or 2 of each other every single season. But we know about these storms so far ahead of time. What do you think, Meagan? Do we need necessarily to forecast something like that?
I think it's an interesting perspective, honestly. So, I like grabbing every bit of information and kind of collectively putting it together, just kind of researching things, especially about the tropical season. I think it's an interesting perspective to see, what other researchers are looking at other universities.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would never want to, hold back on what, like I say, let's discuss conditions. Like I said, that's why I want to jump in that Zoom meeting tomorrow morning and learn more about what these experts are seeing, what they're feeling. But to quantify it ahead of the season, to me, is not that necessary because of how much ahead of the storm we can be now. Thanks to technology, we're watching these storms from their conception, and we can see them weeks out of any kind of threat to a mainland area.
So, Bill, you do have some questions here. We have a second grader asking how it goes from cold to hot from one day to the next. And, speaking about a low pressure system, sometimes we can have these fronts associated with them, especially at the surface. And typically when we go from cold to hot, it is a cold front moving through, right?
Absolutely. So today we're experiencing a warm front, and it's helping to warm things up, moisten things up for today's rain, and then what could actually fuel some thunderstorms from about Austin into North Texas. We're not too concerned about a thunderstorm environment. While we could see a thunderstorm this afternoon, the best chance is up I-35 and north of Austin of seeing some stronger storms develop just because of the ingredients in place. But yeah, warm front, cold front. So a lot of times we're going to study exactly where these fronts are moving and how that'll affect temperature. So we know that tomorrow shouldn't be too much different as far as temperatures go from today, because we're definitely not looking at a big cold front. We're getting into summer, we're in spring now, but we're going to get into summer where things are just going to get warmer and warmer. So now we will not have those big Canadian fronts moving this far south for several months. And that means we will stay warm and grow in temperature to hot days. Of course, June, July, August, and September around here can get really hot. And then by late September, October, those fronts start moving again farther south. So to answer the question, we study surface fronts. When we talk fronts, we're down here at the surface, okay? Those are surface areas and surface weather makers. And that colder, dense, heavier air comes in behind that cold front. And depending on just how strong it is just how long we'll stay that cold or that warm, just depending. Let's see some other.
Right. And, Bill, I wanted to mention this, how do we know as meteorologists if we're under high pressure versus low pressure? But we do have station plots, and we have all these different weather sensors around our viewing area, the state of Texas, across the nation. And some of these weather, plots and these weather stations can give us the pressure. So the lower the pressure, we're probably going to be closer to an area of low pressure. The higher the pressure, the complete opposite, a high pressure.
So one of the things to bring in on that, great way to segue in, is the weight of the air. So barometric pressure is the result. A barometer is the instrument, but the barometric pressure is measuring the weight of the air. And just like you have high pressure, you have heavier air. A big misconception is that low pressure and humid air is leading to that thick, heavy air. Well, it's heavy with moisture in that sense, but it's not heavy in density. Dense, heavy air is a result of high pressure because our barometer that's measuring that is going to be rising. We have a rising barometer. We're getting heavier air. And just the opposite with low pressure, we'd have lowering barometric pressure. The pressure's dropping. So in a hurricane, that's when the pressure bottoms out. I mean, it falls rapidly. And we watch that very closely because that's a sign that the storm is strengthening, is when that air pressure is lowering in that storm, okay? One of the great analogies I've always used is weight. So if something weighs, like, say, 50 pounds, just think of how easy it is to push that over, right? Or somebody like me who weighs about 200 pounds. That's not bad, right? I mean, the camera's adding about 10, so maybe 210 right now, right? But how much harder would it be for me if I could push down something that weighs 50, or how difficult would it be for you to push me down if I weigh 200, right? The weight difference. So that lighter is falling down. Think of that as the instability. You're not very stable when you're experiencing low pressure. So Caleb, and that goes right to your question, Caleb's a first grader, wants to know, how do clouds change from storm clouds to another cloud? Very good question, because what happens, Caleb, that area of low pressure, that's the rising air. So you're pumping in warm air, moist air. You're getting a lot of winds, and that's going to start to build that cloud and build that convective process if everything else in those upper elevations is dovetailing, if it's all cooperating right. We have cold air, we don't have warm air, and all those kind of things are occurring. Well, then we're building into that storm cloud. Then eventually it'll rain out, and it can, of course, dissipates. Lilana, what can L make heat? I'm not sure I understand that question, but remember that high pressure makes heat. So when we talk about that sinking motion, let's go back to the beginning here of that one graphic did it really well. Let me show you. There we go. All right. If you can pop up that graphic again, Andrew, and I'll show you that sinking air motion is what creates the heat, not the low. So high pressure will make air warmer, because what the physics of the atmosphere tells us is that if we're pushing down, your compression is going to increase the temperature. So that'll make it hotter. A lot of times, that's what's happening with a cold front, that prefrontal compression of air. That's why it heats up the day before the cold front, or the afternoon before the nighttime cold front will be pretty warm because of that compression in the atmosphere out ahead of the cold front. How fast can a hurricane form? Zane's in 4th grade. Very. We've seen hurricanes form, especially here. Remember Harvey? Harvey was a tropical depression, went to a tropical wave in the Bay of Campeche, which is south of the Gulf of Mexico, and within 24 hours became a Cat 4 hurricane. I mean, it ramped up so fast. It dissipated. I remember it was a tropical disturbance and moved across Mexico, got battered apart. Remember, hurricanes hate land. They destroy them, or it destroys them. And so when it comes out of that, it was all battered, it was sheared apart, it was just nothing more than a tropical wave. It developed in that bay in the southern Gulf of Mexico, ramped up into a hurricane in 24 hours. It was so fast. And every one of them is different, Zane. Every one of them can be, quick or slow, or, each one is different. That's why they all have names now. So that, and the biggest reason for names is because we can have multiple ones at the same time. So it's important to know which one we're talking about when information's out there. But it also tells you that, again, every one of them is different. Is a no, there's no tornado in the area, Cindy. No, absolutely not. Making me want to check radar. So I'll go to live radar here. And we're waiting from the update. Radar scope, wonderful weather radar app. Slow signal here at the station. But there were some showers early. We got a little downpour at the Taylor compound out in Helotes today. There we go. Up I-35, and these are just scattered showers. Nothing really heavy until you get up near Georgetown and Killeen and Waco. We've got some thunderstorms. But yeah, here in the San Antonio area, it looks like it's east, a little bit of light rain. Kendall County's getting a decent amount of light rain. Moderate showers at best. But as we get into the afternoon, we do have a chance of seeing a couple of isolated thunderstorms, but the environment for that is much better to our north. And that's why we're not expecting anything in the area. In fact, Meagan, Massey, you were on last night. The Severe Prediction Center actually had a marginal risk up north, right? North of Austin. I think we lost Meagan. But that was the report last night. Severe Prediction Centers out of Oklahoma, and they look at the region to see what kind of conditions are in place. And sure enough, we've got conditions, again, north of Austin. I'm acting like you can see this, but north of Austin is where we have you can see I-35. That's where you start getting some of that heavier rain and even a couple thunderstorms. But as we get into daytime heating, that helps fuel. It just went black. That's what helps fuel more rain. So I think we should start popping a few more showers as we get into the 2, 3, 4 o'clock hour and into this evening. But we'll keep a close eye on that for you. No severe weather threat for San Antonio. Make sure I got some questions in. Why do we name hurricane and tropical Paisleys and Divine? So I mentioned, I'm glad, I didn't even see that question, but I mentioned that we name them because we can have multiple storms at the same time, and it's very important that everyone knows exactly which storm you're talking about, because that could be the one that's affecting your area. So that's how we name them. And it was in the 1950s that they started naming them. Before that, like in the 1920s, 1930s, there was no name. They would just say the storm of that summer or that year. And they would only be talking about one at a time. Well, in the 50s, it was all female names. And then in the 70s is when they started going boy, girl, boy, girl. So you know that if you have a boy storm, the next name is going to be female, so on and so forth. And they come up with a list that they'll reuse every so many years, but they'll always retire the big storm names, like Harvey, Katrina, Andrew. Those are names you'll never see again. In fact, this came up with my niece in Louisiana. Bertha was on the list for this year. She's on the list, and that sounds like it could be a tough one. What's the lowest form of a hurricane? Susan wants to know. As far as air pressure goes, so let me give you an example. The barometric pressure is typically like 10, like when you measure it in millibars, you measure it at 1,013 is standard, or 29.92 inches of barometric pressure. That's when you measure it in mercury. It's going to be 29.92, and then you can measure it and have 1,013 millibars, right? Well, it doesn't have to change much for it to be significant, put it that way. So even from like a standard 1,015, if we get it down to like 800, that is apocalyptic low. So the record, and I think it's Wilma now, but I remember when Gilbert had the lowest barometric pressure ever measured, and it was 888 millibars. Okay, and again, standard is about 1,015. So again, you're not changing too much, but that's a significant drop in air pressure. And so usually the hurricanes we're tracking are hovering right around 990 to 1,000, and we watch that number closely with all the instrumentation that they drop into the storms to see if it's lowering or if it's going up. If it's lowering, the storm is strengthening. Okay, so to answer your question, the lowest that I can remember is 888, but I think Wilma, which I don't believe ever hit land at its strongest point, thank goodness, was out in the Atlantic. Do you remember that? Meagan, you back? Oh, good. Is that right? The record? I don't know if they can hear. I can't hear you right now, but.
One sec.
There you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we had internet problems,
Oh, no worry.
but I'm back. Yeah.
Good deal. So we were talking about how low pressure can get in nature's biggest storm, the hurricane. And I remember Gilbert most, but I thought Gilbert's record was broken, and there was a storm that produced even lower pressure.
Okay. I think it was Irma.
Irma. It wasn't Wilma. I was close. I knew it was, sounded like. But yeah, I know that Gilbert's record got broken. What causes
No, I remember
winds?
Harvey for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, any powerful storm, any Cat 3, 4, Cat 5, the pressure is going to be very low. I mean, it has to be that large. It's raining a bit in Bexar County, Cynthia, absolutely. What causes, Sarah wants to know, winds to blow in different directions. So winds will change direction based on surface areas of high pressure or low pressure. If we have, let's say, that high pressure, let's draw in the coast. Let's say this is the Texas coast right here. And there's a high sitting right off the coast of Texas, right? So we're up here in San Antonio. Well, we're going to get winds coming clockwise off that high. So we will have a prevailing southeast wind, which is the prevailing weather condition for us, by the way. And just the opposite, if high pressure is sitting above us, right, we're going to get a north wind coming in at the surface. And that's typically what happens behind the cold front. The surface high drops in and supplies us with that north to northeast wind until it moves. Remember, these are on the move all the time at the surface and at the upper levels. They're always moving, typically west to east, sometimes east to west, what we call a, here's another term, retrograde. That's when it backs up in the opposite direction of what's typically occurring from west to east. So Joe Mendez, hurricanes form when low pressure, typically we see it off the coast of Africa, gets out over open water and feeds. Your favorite food, whatever that is, right? You love to feed upon it. Well, the low pressure's favorite food is that warm air, that warm water. And so when it gets out over those open waters in June through November is when those waters are cooked up nice. That's when those storms begin to build and become a hurricane. Angela, Billy wants to know the answer to his question. I've got to go find it. Connie, I'm on the east side. Yeah, hi Lindsay, my sister, a teacher up in Pennsylvania, Lidditz. Fantastic town. Pretzel factory, chocolate factory. I love Lidditz. Oh, eastern Pennsylvania is beautiful. Where in Pleasanton is it raining? Okay, Angela, I can't find your question. So Ellie's watching, Reagan's watching, my little niece is up in Pennsylvania. You've always got a friend in Pennsylvania, especially when you got tailors in Pennsylvania. Sorry. Helen, 8 years old, wants to tell you that once it rained fish because a tornado picked up fish from the sea and dropped it on land. That has happened. Tornadoes can get them up. Sharknado, how many of those? Like 3 or 4 of those movies? The sci-fi thrillers? So yeah, that has definitely happened. You know, now remember, a tornado's not going to go underwater. That's why it'll never be a shark. But anything at the surface, you know, say, you know, there's flying fish. Fish jump out of the water. You've all seen that. Well, maybe one happens to jump out right at the same time as the vortex is over, sucks it up. Yeah, that could definitely happen. What causes hurricanes to spin? Definitely low pressure. Definitely what we talked about in the hemispheres, and how the Earth, as it's rotating and spinning, it's going to also affect the spin on a surface system like a hurricane? Good question. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up, guys. I'm so glad you watched us on our live interactive weather classroom, Cloudy with a Chance of Learning. Meagan, closing thoughts?
I think you covered it all, Bill. I'm just excited for the week ahead and our new schedule. And I think we have a lot of interesting topics. And of course, for you viewers, don't forget to share your fun stories with us on Friday.
Thank you, Andrew. Here's the schedule. Tomorrow coming up, the 4 seasons, how they happen, why, winter, spring, summer, or fall. All you've got to do is call. That's my Uncle James Taylor right there. And I'll be there. Yes, I will, Mike Humphreys, our chief photographer. You've got a friend. So do you, Danny. That's right, pal. Who loves you? That's right. Maybe we should have a karaoke day in Cloudy with a Chance of Learning. On Wednesday, Solar 101. How does solar energy work? You're seeing more and more solar panels go on the roofs of our homes in San Antonio. How does that even work? Then, the upper level cap. What is that all about on Thursday before our Fun Time Friday, which is where I'd love to share your pictures about what we're talking about, a story about what you've experienced like we had today, just different elements of weather and some jokes. I mean, we're taking it all in. This is yours. I want you guys to help us produce these as we move forward because as I mentioned, right now, our school districts in San Antonio are distance learning until April 24th. That could be extended. If it is, Cloudy with a Chance of Learning will be extended. We're so blessed to bring this to you. We've got the greatest weather team in the history of Ken's 5 right now, and I'm really glad I'm a part of it. So this is a wonderful opportunity to teach you guys, for us all to learn together. So send in your pictures. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you see us again tomorrow right here on Ken's 5's Facebook or our YouTube, weekdays at 1 o'clock. Have a wonderful Monday. God bless y'all. Love you.